Wah bhai wah. I'm hearing a lot of comments over Instagram, YouTube as well as on email that all of you without exception have done the English literature paper rather well. So extremely happy, very happy. Most of you are saying that you will get in the high 90s. I truly wish and pray that comes true. But let me make a confession, I didn't find the paper easy. I thought the paper was quite tough. A lot of intricate questions asked, especially in poems like Bangle Sellers, even in Merchant of Venice. Lot of intricate details expected from you, and that's what I have been saying right all along. Familiarity with the text is what has been tested. Okay, so I hope you have answered all the questions along with the keywords. Most of you are saying you did, which is good. But as I said, I didn't find the paper all that very easy, and I was wondering actually what kind of choices I would actually make. But yes, the good thing is that most of the predictions in fact came true. I had specifically said that you should do Act 3 Scene 1, the Shylock Tubal scene. That has come, an extract from there, and of course trial scene. So for those who were planning to do only the court scene would have actually been safe if they had actually done so, but I was insisting that you need to do something else as a buffer. Casket scene did not come at all, and a Launcelot Gobbo scene came. God. Anyway, Bangle Sellers, disappointed that Cold Within didn't come, but we had predicted Bangle Sellers. One of the two Indian authors, R.K. Narayan, did not come. So next year, I think R.K. Narayan stands a good chance, almost definitely so. Bangle Sellers, and then you had Hearts and Hands, which we had predicted, and Blue Bead came. I mean, among the girl protagonist stories, both Little Match Girl as well as Blue Bead came. But anyway, let's go in order. Let's first come to the Merchant of Venice. The first extract was from Act 2 Scene 2, Launcelot and Gobbo, which is really the comic piece in this particular play. The questions, as I said, very detailed and really testing how well you understand the play and whether you have read the entire scene and know it word by word, line by line. What information does Gobbo seek from Lancelot at the beginning of this scene? He seeks information about Lancelot and Lancelot, that whole humor about that he is dead, playing games. But one particular question, second one, who are the sisters three? And I really hope, in fact, the student whose printout I have taken, he has actually tick marked this one, so which means he has attempted this, and I really hope the sisters 3 thing he has actually explained it in detail, because the sisters 3 were the fates or destinies. They spun the thread of human life. Clotho represented the spindle, with the spindle spun the thread. Lachesis gave it to a man as his fate, and Atropos cut it off when his life was to end. Even I did not remember it very clearly. Now, the second part is that what role were they thought to play in the lives of humans? Now, they symbolized fate and destiny. So you needed to kind of expand on that, because it would be for at least 1.5 marks, that the kind of role they were supposed to play in the lives of humans, and the fact that, you know, these kind of references were being made as far as this particular scene between Lancelot and Gobbo was concerned. Also, given the fact that Lancelot likes to talk about big things, likes to show himself as someone who is educated, actually lending the comic touch, the humor touch as far as this entire play is concerned. Now, who was Lancelot Master? Now, these are all very straight questions. What gift had Gobbo brought him? What does Lancelot want to do with him? The dish of cooked doves, I hope that has been written. Lancelot wants it to be given to Bassanio. Again, what reasons does Lancelot give? This whole animosity with Shylock. I mean, he's in the service of Shylock. And why does Gobbo have trouble recognizing Lancelot? And what purpose does this scene serve in the context of the play? That is really the most important, and that would have gone for at least 3 marks, because the last question was of 4 marks. So the first question would probably go for 1 mark. But what purpose does this scene serve in the context of the play? In which case you would have had to write about the fact that this is actually a comedy. So therefore, they would need to kind of have these kind of comic interludes coming into the play, because otherwise this whole play with all Shylock's animosity towards Antonio, wanting to extract his pound of flesh, etc., makes it a very heavy duty play. So the entire introduction of Lancelot and Gobbo, etc., is to introduce the humorous element. So I hope all that has been written in great detail. The second one is, as I said, the scene, Act 3 Scene 1, the Shylock scene, in which he speaks about the whole anger that he kind of displays at Antonio and the whole spirit of revenge. In fact, one of the questions is that the given extract reveals two distinct emotions that Shylock experiences. What are they? Give one reason to justify each of these emotions. So the fact that you need to talk about the feeling of insult, the feeling of anger, and of course revenge as the main emotion, and give a reason to justify. So you needed to tweak about what all the animosity that Shylock had vis-a-vis Antonio. That all has to be spoken about in the 4 mark. The 4 mark question is really what I'm bothered about, because that's what gives you scope and an opportunity to expand and show to the examiner that you understand the play very, very well. Apart from that, who is he? What does Shylock want from him? What does Shylock mean by to bait fish withal, etc. is pretty much, those are things which you would know. You would also speak about the fact that 3 ways in which he had wronged Shylock. That has been explained in detail about how Antonio had insulted Shylock on multiple occasions. According to Shylock, in other ways that in what other ways did Jews resemble Christians, in which you would need to talk about that they are not very different from Christians, because when he demands, when a Christian is injured by a Jew, what course of action the Christian takes. He declares that the Christian takes revenge instead of following the teachings of the Bible. So this particular passage not only tests you on this particular Act 3 Scene 1, but also tests you on how well you know about the entire relationship between Shylock, the animosity that Shylock had vis-a-vis Antonio, which is why I was telling you that if you had prepared those 8 to 10 points about Shylock and Antonio, all that wealth of information, you would have put it out here, and I do hope that you have put it out here. Otherwise, it would really not be a problem. So, a combination of intricate details and also testing your knowledge about the entire play. Let's come to question 3, which is from the court scene, the trial scene, and that's about, a lot of students had been asking me whether we really need to know about the speech on mercy that Portia gives in the trial scene, and I have been going on saying that yes, it has been important. I have replied to many students that that particular mercy speech is important. You cannot afford to ignore it. So that's precisely what has come. So I hope that all those students had listened to me and prepared for that speech of Portia very, very carefully. Okay. So now the quality of mercy is not strained, it droppeth as the gentle rain from heaven. Where does the scene take place, which is precisely what I had said, that you needed to explain it. Of course, in this particular case, the court in Venice of the Duke. Why is Portia here dressed, as the doctor of civil law? Why does Bassanio not recognize her? Again, something which you need to talk about, this whole thing of cross-dressing, dressed as Balthazar, etc., etc. To what is mercy compared in this lanes? Why is mercy said to be twice blessed? The whole thing of the comparison with this scepter, that is something very important. What is a scepter is something which has been asked specifically in this particular scene, and that is something very important, because it's a decorated rod carried by a king or queen, and it is a symbol of power. All these things which we had declared, which we had discussed in detail in the trial scene, which we had covered in 5 parts. Now the talk about the scepter, the fact that the king's scepter is an outward symbol of his earthly power, gives him the majesty. That is all things which you need to discuss and point out in this particular manner. So essentially talking about the mercy speech. Also in the 5th part of this particular question, what does the person say in response to Portia's words? So essentially they are also testing you on how well you know the passages that follow immediately after this particular speech given by Portia about mercy. How Shylock reacts: my deeds upon my head, I crave the law, the penalty and the forfeit of my bond. And then later on how Bassanio reacts. Now Portia is seen as the dramatic heroine of the play, and the 4 mark question is what I am most concerned about, because I would assume that the 3 marks question which tests you on the intricate parts of the play you would have known. Using references from the text, mention any 2 aspects of her character that appeal to you most, which is why I had said if you had prepared the character sketch of Portia, Portia, this kind of questions would be so easy for you. So talking about her legal acumen, the manner in which she manages to save Antonio after kind of in a way almost leading Shylock into a trap. The other thing also, apart from her legal acumen, her kind of wit and humor, her diplomacy in the manner in which she deals with her suitors in the past. But in this particular case, since it's about the court scene, you will need to refer to her legal acumen and the fact that she also is someone who believes in the whole concept of mercy, in the whole concept of justice. She believes that even though Shylock has the upper hand as far as the bond is concerned, he should ideally show mercy. So those are the different characteristics of Portia that you could have discussed in this last question. Okay, so that's as far as the Merchant of Venice is concerned. I hope you have dealt with it pretty well. Most students, I would expect, would have dealt with the trial scene. Though the Act 3 scene 1 also should have been easy. Launcelot and Gobbo is a little bit of a dicey scene because I don't know how many of you actually prepared it. It was definitely not in the list of 10 scenes that I had suggested that you should definitely read. Okay, so that has been a bit of a surprise instead of the casket scenes giving the Launcelot and Gobbo scene. Okay, now let's come to the poetry part of the examination paper. Let's look at the 3 poems which have been asked to you in this particular examination, and the first one is the Bangle Sellers, and I must admit I found the questions a little tricky. They really test your understanding of the poem of the Bangle Sellers by Sarojini Naidu, and that's something which we had said, one of the 2 Indian authors. So it's been Bangle Sellers this particular time. Let me just take out, why does the poet talk about why does the poet use the word delicate to describe the bangles? Now, what would you say? Delicate, basically because they are symbols of innocence, something tender, beautiful to be taken care of, just like the young women and the girls. The second one, how is rainbow tinted circles of light an appropriate description of bangles? Now, this is an important and an interesting question. Now, the rainbow tinted circles of light, essentially the figure of speech is a metaphor. Multicolored bangles are compared to the radiant lives of happy wives and happy daughters, happy wives, and the multicolored bangles are linked to the dreams and the youthfulness and the aspirations of happy daughters, happy wives. The other thing which we had also pointed out while we were discussing this particular poem is about how rainbow is also in a sense very, very delicate. So the delicate word is used in the sentence, and that is something which you should have hopefully pointed out, that the delicate word is not in the 2 lines which has been given to you as an extract. It is the sentence which it is in the sentence which follows soon after the 3rd sentence. Okay, and the rainbow one is in the sentence after that, the 4th sentence. So the fact that the delicate is linked to the rainbow, and the rainbow is also seen as something delicate, comes immediately after the rain, and it needs a bit of the sunlight in order to be seen, be visible in the sky, right? So that is something which you should have spoken about. Then of course there is the literal meaning of shining lords, again which we have discussed in the poem, the radiant bangles, then the lustrous tokens of radiant lives. The shining lords, of course, the radiant bangles being spoken of as lords because they are large in quantity and are being carried by the bangle sellers to the temple fair. The lustrous tokens of radiant lives, essentially talking about the bangles which are glossy, shining symbols, tokens of happy and joyful daughters and wives, for happy daughters and happy wives. So creating that kind of a happy imagery. The third question is actually I found a little tricky. Now, the several images of sight and sound to create a musical effect in the poem, mention any 3 examples of these images. Now, again, as I said, you needed to have understood and known the poem in great detail in order to be able to answer and address this kind of a question. Now, there is this thing of the words like tinkling, luminous, tender and clear. These are all sights and sounds. Apart from that, there is also the reference to the mountain mist which she speaks about. Then there is a thing, the sight of the sunlit corn. Okay, so those are some of the the sights that have been spoken about. Then there is the sound of the tinkling luminous, of course, the splendid laughter of a bride, and also the bridal laughter and the bridal tears. So those are some of the imageries using both sights and sounds that Sarojini Naidu has used in this particular poem. I hope when you have kind of addressed and explained all this, you have used a lot of quotes, because that is what would be expected by the examiner, because you have been given only 2 lines. So when you are doing the rest of the analysis, the questions relating to the rest of the poem, you would also be expected to actually quote extensively from the rest of the poem. What are the emotions that the poet associates with the bride on her wedding day? We have discussed that in great detail. What colors are the bangles? Again, what colors the maiden, middle-aged woman, the blue and the grey and the golden grey, and how does the poet describe the thoughts and concerns of women in both these stages of life? You know, how does the 2 stages kind of not conflicted, but essentially they are in contrast to each other. Again, something which we have discussed in great detail during our analysis of this particular poem, are basically talking about the maturity, the wisdom, about how she brings her family together at that stage of her life, in contrast to the young girl who is kind of full of hope and full of youthfulness, full of dreams. All those aspects you would need to speak about. Those, many of them would be the keywords, but nothing like, as Madam Amrita Chandra had also pointed out, if you have quoted from the text, those will be your keywords. So if you have done that, absolutely nothing to worry, you would score very high marks. The eighth question is from Maya Angelou's I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. In the context of the poem, who is a free bird? We expected either cold within or the caged bird. So the caged bird has been asked. In the context of the poem, who is a free bird and who is a caged bird? What mood do the above lines convey? So you needed to kind of contrast the caged bird as well as the free bird. That, you know, what do the 2 kind of birds symbolize in this poem by Maya Angelou? How does a free bird live his life, you know, by owning the sky and going there and kind of, you know, claiming the entire sky as his own? What are the things that he thinks and of dreams about? What does the caged bird? So this entire contrast you would need to bring about. What are the restrictions on the freedom of the caged bird? What do you understand from the title of the poem, and what do you like about the poem? What do you like about the poem is the raw emotion that Maya Angelou has managed to bring about in this particular poem. What do you understand about the title of the poem? Because she's right up at in the poem, she's saying, I know why the caged bird sings. Because Maya Angelou, being a civil liberties activist, being a women rights activist, being a human rights activist, is fully aware of why the caged bird is singing, because she understands the pain of someone who is in fetters, on who some kind of restrictions have been imposed, whether they are the black Americans, whether they are the women of the society living in a patriarchal society. I had explained all this in a few comments to a few student subscribers yesterday. So it shows an awareness of the poet with the subject of that particular poem. What do you like about the poem? As I said, the raw emotion and the fact that using this fantastic imagery of 2 birds, she has managed to kind of convey the life of those who are put under some kind of restrictions, whose life are in some way fettered. And then of course, the bird that stalks narrow age, the whole anger, the lack of freedom, all that you needed to speak about. He names the sky his own. You know, the almost the competition with the sun, that the sun thinks that he owns the sky, but the bird also, the manner in which it kind of soars up and freely, it also is kind of almost in competition with the sun. It's also naming the sky as its entire jurisdiction. So all those things you would need to speak about. Then let's now come to Above Ben Adam, the 3rd poem, which has been from where the questions have been asked. Okay, surprised that daffodils didn't come. Truly surprised. Above Ben Adam, may his tribe increase, awoke one night from a deep dream of peace. Now, what did Ben Adam see? Now, these are very straight questions, and I don't think most of you would have had any issues who were actually attempted this particular extract. So, what was the angel's response? Very, very straight questions. This one I thought was very, very easy. What did he tell to the angel? What did the angel do this time? What did the poem, the 4-mark question, what does the poet mean by may his tribe increase? And that is interesting, because the poet is actually, Leigh Hunt is actually endorsing the likes of people like Ben Adam, that someone with a very, very positive mind and a positive heart, that people like him are necessary in this world for the world to be a better place. That's why right at the beginning he says may his tribe increase and puts an exclamation mark also. So I hope those of you who have written this particular answer have explained each and every word of those may his tribe increase with the exclamation mark in detail, saying that, you know, it gives him a joy while he's saying that may his tribe increase, and right at the beginning. So he's making the poet is making his position clear even before he has actually started the poem in many senses. Why do you think he says that? Because he believes that positivity and goodness of heart is what is required in this particular world, that you need more people like Ben Adam who are not just obsessed about being in the angel's book, about the list of people who God loves, but he's equally concerned that if he loves other people, that's as good as being loved by God or loving God. What's the central message of the poem? Pretty much on similar lines, that you need to have the goodness of heart to be able to have that thing of loving fellow human beings is as important as loving God, because most of us get caught in that whole thing of just looking after oneself, that God should look after us. But he believes that if you love the rest of mankind, if you love the rest of society, that's as important as loving God. So the positive message, I hope you have quoted from this. You could have quoted from the book itself when you have been asked these questions in the previous questions. If you have done so, 16 out of 16 could be very much possible. Now let's come to the collection of short stories, the treasure trove stories. The first one is Hearts and Hands. Again, very, very simple and straightforward question. The last one is where you would have had to expand a little bit. The story has a surprise ending. How is the surprise revealed to the reader? There you would need to speak about how the whole kind of twist in the tale comes at the end, when who we think is the real marshal is actually not the real marshal, and Easton is the person who is a convict who is being taken to prison by the other person, who has a bit of a grumpy look. How does Miss Fairchild feel about Mr. Easton? How does she try to convey that? These are all very straight these things. Anyone who has read the story very, very clearly would not have any issues in the manner in which these particular questions have to be answered. How was Mr. Easton's other hand otherwise engaged? The handcuffs, you need to explain that in detail. How does Miss Fairchild react when he raises his right hand in order to show her what she meant? So that again, you needed to, that whole thing of the manner in which she kind of responded and reacted is what you need to speak about. Okay, and the fact that she continued, while she had the bewildered horror at the beginning, she continued to look at those glittering handcuffs. Her eyes kept moving back to it. Okay, now let's look at the next question, which is from Little Match Girl. Who was she? What can you conclude? That whole thing of the gloomy December 31st cold winter night you needed to speak about. What time of the year was it? Why did she not want to go home? Her father, one reason. The second reason. Remember, this is a 3-mark question. What time of the year was it? December 31st, New Year's Eve. That will get you 1 mark. That's all you needed to write. One line. That's all you needed to write. You'll get that 1 mark. Why did she not want to go home? You need to say because of the father who would scold her if she went home without having sold the matches. Second reason is that her home was as cold because obviously they lived in poverty, so there was wind gustling through the house, so obviously it was not something which was very secure from the cold winter. Then you needed to expand on what happened when she lit the first match. Whom did she love dearly? The grandmother. What did she say? Take me with her. What happened to the little girl at the start? The last one, the 4-mark question, is where you would have been tested. Would you consider this a happy ending or a sad one? Obviously, it's a happy ending, mainly because she was leading a life of absolute misery. So much so that even she could not even protect her slippers, because when she crossed the street, she lost the slippers. So it was an unhappy life. Her father was very strict, scolded her, and she had to she was too scared to even go back home. Home is something which is considered a place where you would feel secure. That was not the case as far as the Little Match Girl is concerned. So it was a happy ending, even if she kind of passed away. The fact that in her last moments, she found a whole lot of solace and happiness to be reunited with the person she loved the most and with the person who loved her the most, her grandmother. So in that sense, she went in a blaze of glory and became a star. So in that sense, it was a happy ending. Even though it was a death, it was a happy ending and almost a release for her from the miserable life, from the very unhappy life that she was leading on earth. The blue bead is your 12th question and it has come as a 4 plus 4 plus 8. I don't know how many of you attempted. One person wrote to me saying that she has attempted this particular question and wanted to know whether if she has written it in detail, whether she would get 8 on 8. If you have written all the keywords, good chance of you getting it. It's just that, if you have left out a couple of keywords here and there, a couple of points here and there is always a chance of you falling short by 1 mark and being given 7 out of 8, which is why I was suggesting that I would prefer the 3 plus 3 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4 kind of a combination. But the questions are pretty similar, simple. The describe experience at the bazaar, that whole sweets and the ornaments, everything you needed to describe. It would have really tested your, sorry, it was not a girl, it's a boy from Bangalore who had written this particular, who has attempted this particular question. Describe CBI's experience. So you would really need to know all that in great detail and listed out all the details for you to get those 4 marks. Who were the Gujars? Again, that entire life cycle, the nomads, the kind of cattle rearing they did, the kind of agriculture that they indulged in, all that would have had to be described in great detail. And then the final, the 8-mark question, you would have to kind of recreate the entire drama of how CBI saved the Gujar woman from the crocodile, and if you have done so, well, you have a good chance of getting an 8 if you have included the keywords and have managed with good vocabulary and good language and correct grammar and no spelling mistakes, managed to kind of recreate the entire episode of how CBI, brave CBI, managed to save Gujar woman from the crocodile. What did CBI regard as a highlight of that fateful day? Finding the blue bead. So that is something. But what does this tell about CBI is going to fetch you actually at least 3 marks would be devoted to that, or even maybe, yeah, at least 3 marks. So what does this tell about CBI? Because description would probably take about 4 to 5 marks or 4 marks, then this would be about 1 mark and this would be about 2 to 3 marks. What is the fact that her innocence, that she doesn't think much of the fact that she has saved someone like that from near death. And she thinks it's okay, it's all in a part of life, but she's much more happy about finding the blue bead, and that shows her innocence of heart. She shows that she's basically a young child who finds happiness in these kind of small joys, and the fact that she did not have a bead for her necklace and she had been looking for one. She was poor, so poor that she did not even have a needle, that had broken, and she had to wait to be able to afford to buy a new needle, but this one had already a hole in it, so she would be able to use it. So her joys really came from the fact that she had found this nice blue bead while just immediately after she had vanquished the crocodile. So that's as far as your English 2 paper is concerned. As I said at the beginning, happy that most of you have done well. I'm sure you would get good marks. Now to get set for the history civics examination, of course, for which you have a 4-day break. So many of you would obviously consider preparing for physics sometimes during this break also, because physics has just about a day's break. So we'll see you during your preparation of history and civics, and also have got some lovely video interviews as far as physics are concerned, which will really help you prepare and revise and study for your physics examination. So all that will come over the course of the next few days on Study with Sudhir. Thank you very much for watching.